Have you got a knack for storytelling? Do you have an adventure that you feel that everybody should hear about? Storytelling is a key in almost everything we do today. We have an amazing guest here today to talk about how storytelling. Have you got a knack for storytelling? Do you have an adventure that you feel that everybody should hear about? Storytelling is a key in almost everything we do today. We have an amazing guest here today to talk about how storytelling has helped tell her life from going from orphan to successful entrepreneur. We're going to find out this and a little bit more coming up next. And this is To The Point. Got a good show for you today. Great guest. Again, like I said at the beginning, we're going to be talking about storytelling, and I'm on record for saying storytelling is not story yelling, and so many people tell their stories by screaming it at you, and I don't think that solves anything for any of us, and in fact, it's kind of annoying when they do it that way, but I digress. Being able to knock out everything that we need to do and tell your story is key in business as in life. And we all have those folks in their families. I'm probably one of them in mine that tells the ever-ending story and adds flavor to the story as you go. Some of us are such fine storytellers, it's like making an amazing super chili. You just keep throwing ingredients in and it makes it go good because you want people to experience it like you did. That is the key ingredient to storytelling. It's having fun and telling a fun story. Now, not all stories are fun to tell, but sometimes they make you feel what is going on in the world and tell that story from a different point of view. As we know, stories are spun by mainstream media on the left and the right. A perfect example has been if you've been able to watch the RNC or the DNC in 2020, you're like, holy crap, the coverage of media is completely different. It depends on the story they're telling. Same thing goes with hurricanes and how those stories are told, or how people spin exactly what goes on depending on what the story is. Recently in the NBA, a basketball player stepped on an all-star pro's ankle and said, "I would never play like that." But the video sure doesn't lie and looks like you intentionally sprinted all the way across the court and stepped on Luka Doncic's ankle. I don't know, but to me, you just have to be a good storyteller, and some people just are not. So again, today's guest is about storytelling, and we're going to go deep dive into our guest's past and their history of talking about telling their story of going from an orphan to a success here in America. So let's welcome to our show today our guest and get to the point with today's guest. Welcome to the show, Rachel. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Eric, thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was great. I believe we met you on LinkedIn. You're one of our amazing followers on LinkedIn that we always talk to every time you're on there. Always encouraging people. Like we always tell people, comment to our team. Unlike a lot of shows out there, we actually have a team that wants to respond. We love engagement. We want to have folks who go from followers to guests on our show because, like it turned out, you have an amazing story that we wanted to share. So I always tell people, some people write in and they're like, "Eric, I don't think my story is good enough." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you ask us? Tell us first, and we'll tell you. Like, let us know." I love a good story, and a lot of people, that's why I wanted to talk to you. I love how you talk about storytelling. You know, I think it's so key. I use it in business. But, let's jump into this. So you have such a powerful story, and it's rooted in your passion for storytelling, like we kind of started here. What inspired you to write your memoir? By the way, folks, Rachel has an amazing memoir that you should really go out. So before we get into why you wrote it, share a little bit about your memoir, and then let's jump into that question. If you need me to re-ask it, that's fine. I totally get it. But let's talk about your book first, and then we can go from there.
Eric, honestly, I wrote the book because it was extremely therapeutic for me because I've been through a lot. And the idea actually came from a really good friend of mine. And she just said she had been to India with me. I actually met her in India. She went back and she planted that seed. And she said, Rach, you have a story, and it's a story that needs to be told. So I sat down, and the first day I wrote for 5 hours a day, and it was like that until I finished the book.
Wow.
And I'm hoping that, I was doing part of the book tour, and the book came out in 2018, and my goal, Eric, honestly, is to inspire a lot of people.
Sweet. That's good, is to inspire people. And what causes you to, when it comes to inspiring people, we all have this fire that causes this. I know we've had different guests on our show. David Melsner's been on our show with his mission to inspire and drive happiness in 1 billion people. We had Mike Sirocco was on the show, and he was talking about his mission to inspire others. What drives you to inspire others? There's this amazing thing that humans do where we don't always focus on ourselves. We like to make sure we inspire others. So I'm curious, what is your why that drives you to inspire others?
It really comes down to where I came from. Okay. My mom died 2 days after giving birth. I'm looking for my biological father. I was adopted by an incredible, incredible family. I go back to India and I stay at the orphanage. And I am taking part of the proceeds of my book is getting donated back to the orphanage. That's what gets me up every single day. That's honestly it. I've lost a child through, a miscarriage, and I had another really painful experience too. So that door, being a mom, was closed on me many years ago. And my healing moment came when I was at the orphanage in India. And one of my friends said, she works at the orphanage. She said, how lucky are you? You have hundreds of kids. You have all these children at the orphanage that you can get up for, and you can fight for, and you can stand up for. And those are the kids that carry my heart. That's why you see me doing everything I'm doing every day.
I love that. And that ties into so many things that have come out in 2020. If you think about it, 2020 has been standing up for things that inspire and drive you and to be a voice. And I think it's important that we do this, and so many people don't like it. They push back on it because they don't like it, whether it be people kneeling for the national anthem, which personally I don't think I don't understand why so many people are offended by something as petty as kneeling when they're doing it for a cause that they believe in. And we see it in the news every day. Obviously, they need to continue doing it because we have police officers still shooting people, and we have protests going on in our country, and we have a country in disarray. But yours is different. You're doing it because you want to give back, because orphans, folks that go through this, I told you off camera about my mother-in-law, but so many people go through this and they don't understand how hard it is, especially what you're going through, never having that relationship with your mother, something so many of us, cherish, have you found your biological father, or are you still on that journey?
I'm still on that journey, and Eric, I'll say this, I was adopted by amazing people, and I've been with them since I'm 11 months old. Okay. I'm still on the journey. I have very small amount of clues, and when I am in India, I physically look. I have small bits of information, and I have people who are trying to help me with it, but I'm going to continue to look. It's almost like, Eric, it's a primal drive. Yeah. My biological family is separate from my other family, and they understand that.
Oh, gotcha. You have to do it. We've had other folks on the show who have talked about the same thing. I have friends that have, done similar journeys, and it's this. I just recently saw a friend online finally connect with her biological father, and she's like 41, 42. Finally, out of the blue, connected with him. So and she wasn't even looking. He came looking for her because he just, I guess, did these, the swabs that you could do, the 23andMe and the ancestries. So let me ask you this.
Sure.
What have you learned from your journey and experiences from adoption, culture, and family? Obviously, it's a whole different realm being raised as an adopted child, right? I mean, it's different because that's, you figure out pretty fast if it's your family or not. And so, how has that been? What has your journey been like, and what have your experiences like growing up, going through this, and now as an adult kind of being able to give back and inspire others who are going through the same thing?
It was really simple for me because my family being all, white and me being brown at a very young age is very simple. It's like, why are you white? Why am I brown? And it was explained to me. It has been a big part of my identity, trying to fit in, and then add being an Indian Jewish woman and fitting into all three of those. I don't. I have a couple moments in my life, Eric, where I actually feel like I fit in, and that's my truth. And most of the time, I'll be honest with you, that's when I'm in India. I face a tremendous amount of racism and anti-Semitism in this country, so I'm fighting very hard to speak about that and to say, like, I'm gonna use my voice until racism is done in this country. That's one of my missions right now.
That's one of my favorite topics on this show. I love it. We're going to jump into that side because I think it's important to talk about this, because we have racism in our country disgusts me. And I guess it's because I live on the West Coast, and yes, we know there's racism, but we don't see it. I worked in the Silicon Valley, so trust me, it was a melting pot of everybody there. And when I laugh, because we've had people, even message our show, we have Dr. Shah, who is an amazing doctor from New Jersey, but he's an Indian guy, and he's got a little bit of an accent. A little bit. I mean, to me, I don't even notice it, but I had people like, hey, he's got an accent. And I'm like, I would hope so. He's from India. I would hope that he would have an accent. Thank you for bringing that. I'm like, why do you have him on? You couldn't find another doctor? And to me, it blows me away. I've had friends, especially my African-American friends, they've gone through a lot too, but then I see what the Indian culture goes through in this country with an amazing culture. I mean, talk about loving family. Is probably what the Indian culture always has amazed me, because they're so accepting of everybody. And it's funny that you said you felt more comfortable in India. In fact, our friends when we lived in Northern California, we went and like trick-or-treated with it. And like here we were like the four white folk in this, photo with all of our friends, and we were having fun with them because they were in India, but they treated us the same way. Only thing I learned is their food's wickedly spicy, and my poor Caucasian gut can't handle it, but that's just me.
Very spicy.
Yeah. They're like, we knew that you would not be able to handle that. But it's good food. It's hard to say no to. Yeah. But to hear the to hear this hatred towards the Jewish community still existing in 2020, it disgusts me. As somebody who served our country, as my grandfather served, World War II, Korea, and in Vietnam, it disgusts me that this is still going on, and I see it. In fact, as of last night, as of the night before us recording this, there was a woman who was going to speak on the convention floor at the RNC, and she put up anti-Semitic speech conversations online. Before she went on, she was booted off because we all spotted it, but she put it up. And to me, it blows me away that we still live in this world where people think that's acceptable, and they put some... And here in America, I don't understand the hatred, because I just don't get it, and I don't understand.
It comes from ignorance.
Yeah.
Eric, it truly does. It comes. I've had, the experiences I've had, and I've had 4 racist encounters since March. So it's definitely on the rise in my experience. It comes from fear. It really. I mean, there's men your size, like tall, that cross the street and they see me coming. That stuff is still going on. The stuff of locking the doors. The stuff of asking me if my credit card's good enough to use in the store. Do I own my house? Do I belong in my neighborhood? All that stuff is a true reality. The only difference, Eric, is now people are taking videos. Now people are posting these stories. It's always existed.
Yeah.
But the only difference is I'm not scared to use my voice anymore. And this may be the first time in America's history that people start listening to minorities. We had the first civil rights movement, and thank God that we did, because I'm so grateful for it, because I wouldn't have the rights that I have today. This might be the next civil rights movement.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you, and I think you're right. The first movement was great, and it awakened a lot of people, but then it kind of went it kind of was quieted, right? Everybody was like, oh, this is good enough. Like, I watched a lot of it. Obviously, I was not alive during the civil rights movement, the first one. I'm very much alive right now. And I agree with you. I see this movement, and I just had this with two of our guests on. This is the first time you're seeing more Caucasian folks jumping in and being a voice, where before in the first movement, they were quiet because they were worried about how they would be perceived in public. And now it's like, I don't care how you perceive me. If you perceive me as loving another American, then that's what I'm doing, because I'm not going to let some stupid, idiotic person yell at you from across the street, because I'm going to go across the street and we're going to have words. We're going to discuss it because we see it there, and then we also see it online. And I see it all the time. I mean, we see it on this show. Rachel, I will kid you not, we see the hatred that comes to us by putting our guests on. Oh, do you not put white people on? I mean, it's outrageous, the stuff by producers and I get hit with, and we're never going to change it, because I want to hear your story. I want to hear what you're going through, because we need to waken up America and waken up the rest of the world that we're not going to tolerate it. Because you shouldn't have to go to India to feel comfortable, because we're a melting pot. So what part of the States do you live in? Just out of curiosity.
I live in the Midwest. I live in Iowa. But here's the thing, Eric. I grew up outside Philadelphia. Okay. Then I lived in Florida for over a decade. Then I lived in Missouri. And I do public speaking, and the number one question I get is, what state was the best experience for you when it comes to racism? And my answer is, it's the same in all of them. I said racism is rampant across this whole country. It does not matter what state you live in. That's the reality of it.
So let me ask you this. What do you, since you're going around speaking, and I'm sure you have a presence online because that's how we met, so how do you, I mean, I'm trying to put this together as a question that makes sense. What do you say to folks to how to counter this, right? Obviously, you're not alone. You know, as an Indian woman here in America, as an American at that, you shouldn't have to walk down the street and be treated anyway. We shouldn't, but I mean, women in America are treated completely different. And I'm a father of two beautiful daughters and a wife, and I can tell you, trust me, I'm protective, and people ask me why I'm the dad I am, because I see how my wife is treated on LinkedIn with these little side messages people send. I mean, it's disgusting how women in America are treated. And then I take it one step further, and you know the veterans we put on our show, these amazing women that we put on our show, treated as pieces of meat or catcalled or just racist comments. What are you telling your fellow sisters, we'll call them sisters, what are you telling them to how to overcome this? It's got to be hard. It's not something that you want to deal with on an everyday basis, and it's not like social where you could turn it off or block.
It's really simple, not to be silent anymore and to use your voices. And Eric, here's the reality of it. I could have a racial incident, and there'll be a lot of people standing around who do nothing. And to me, that is way more painful. You know, if you're participating in the bystander effect, you're just as guilty to me. That's exactly how I feel about it.
Cool. That makes, I mean, and I agree with you. I've been reading, I read it, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And that's one of the big statements that, Israel talks about is coming after and speaking out, being that voice, stepping up instead of watching. How many times have you watched a crime take place and you see nothing? And I'll bring up George Floyd because it's one of those incidents that there's a whole lot of camera footage, and the one thing I see is no one saying stop. No one's over there making it stop, using their voice. People are so fearful to get involved, and they want to be, I'm angry, but how are you angry? How are you speaking up? I have this show. This is how I speak out, because I know I have reach, and I'm going to speak out. And I don't care if I'm popular, hated, not hey, we got picked up by a network in 120 days of being on air, so we're doing something right. And we will continue doing it. We'll continue having guests like you on our show to expose and share. And I think it's good. We pull out our video cameras and we film these folks, but people need to stand up and say no. You know, like almost like a movie, but you got to stand up. And I think we saw that in the 60s. You touched on this with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and so many other people who stood up, and they lost their lives over it. And I think we're going to have to see that again, because we're going to have to squash racism. And it's a sad day when you have to go on TV and say, well, this president's not racist. And we've heard this over and over again. It's like, I don't remember being raised where I needed to see the leader of the free world stand there and tell me he's not a racist, and need to have like 100 people tell me this. it blows me away because I think racism is largely ignored in our country. And I mean, a perfect example is it's 2020 and look who our candidates are. Two old crusty white dudes again. It was like, that's the best that they could roll up to the stage is two crusty old white dudes who don't understand the community. I'm guarantee they don't understand, they all want to go, oh, look, we're in Jerusalem today. Like, that's their, like, yep, we love the Jewish community. And it's like, but there's still attacks taking place in New York City on a daily where, Jewish people can't go from point A to point B. Black people are being attacked everywhere. I know Indian folks, you guys get harassed all the time just because it's like, hey, you're brown, you don't belong here, you get all the questions. And then there's folks like me, I'm a white guy who hasn't felt, I'll be honest, I haven't felt any of the stuff because I'm a white guy. I mean, it's basically how it is.
Standing up, Eric, and that's what, honestly, I just had a discussion with one of my really good friends, like, that's what it's going to take. It's not going to take just me standing up and using my voice. It's going to take people like you standing up and using your voice. It is not going to happen overnight, but the more we're consistent about it and we don't excuse behavior, because that's what a lot of people do, they just excuse it, and now's the time not to excuse it anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's true. A lot of people have just looked the other way, and I think it's harder and harder for people to ignore. And I guess we can bless social media for that because it's there. It's every day. You can't ignore it. It becomes table topics. So many things that weren't table topics are now. And I think, not from my personal experience, but I've heard it from my own kids. My kids are teenagers. So when they talk, I listen. And it's funny how they kind of cringe when they're sitting at a table and they can hear the table over from us say something, right? And they're just like, Dad, did you just hear what that person just said out loud? Like, it's amazing how some of our generation, and it makes me feel good because our generation is speaking out and my generation is starting to speak out because we're like, look, we've been here, we've dealt with this, we're not going to be quiet. We didn't know. I mean, I know most of my childhood, I didn't know I could speak out and was encouraged to do it. So, but anyways, we could talk about this forever. I love this topic. So, I mean, how do we make change? That's kind of besides having a voice, what else can we do? We're both storytellers. So we can go and we can weave a good story and get people out there. But how do we do that? Where do we start?
We start by doing exactly what you and I are doing. We start by, I go in and I speak places, and when I speak, that audience goes out, takes the message, and creates that ripple effect, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna keep dropping that seed into these audiences and watch them take it out into the world, just like I'm doing with social media. Yeah. And exposing what's really going on. If you and I are both using social media for good and we're using it for change, this is how we're going to do it. It is going to be a powerful ripple effect.
So while we're talking about this, we just mentioned storytelling, and I think what we're talking about is key. So let's jump into some storytelling here. What does storytelling really mean to you? And why do you think it's such an important tool today? And obviously, we've covered it for current events and topics that are cultural to our country today. I think they apply to everyone. But how else do you, to me, I love storytelling. I think it just adds flavor to a boring story. There's a version, those people who could tell you a very boring story, and you're like, dude, when will this story end? Or there's people who get up there, and it could be a simple talk about my coffee cup, but we can make it fun to talk about. Like, how did you get the coffee cup? What the steps to get it? Those are fun. So where do you see storytelling today, and why do you think it's so important that more folks understand how to do it?
Well, first of all, I love learning somebody's story, right? That if you and I sat down and we're having a cup of coffee, and you're sharing your stories, I'm sharing mine, I remember people's stories. That's supposed to be like, you know what, Eric talked about this. He's a veteran. He was in the Marines. That's what I'm going to remember. It's not going to be, this is what Eric looks like. No, this is a story behind Eric. This is who he is. And in reality, since we have no idea how long this pandemic is, and this is how all conversations are going on right now, this is how we're building bonds and friendships, I want to hear the stories. If I don't hear your story, honestly, Eric, I might not remember you. It started around campfires. How many years? I mean, we've been holding on to the storytelling forever.
True. That's absolutely, getting to know somebody, I think, is so key, especially in this virtual world we now live in, where this is the way that we get to have these virtual coffees, sit down and meet with people. And I think some people are afraid to open up. And I think that's a key to storytelling, is you just have to learn your story and say your story over and over again. And I've learned that by building this show and now taking it to a network. It's funny how we thought we had all those stories done, and now we're like, crap, we have to write another story that is blurbed into this. And it's because we're comfortable we can do it. It's very easy to pivot to tell a story when you do storytelling all the time. So let me ask you this: as you're telling your story, what are some of the things that you make sure you drive across when you're telling your story? Like, for people out there now that are like, okay, I want to become a better storyteller, I want to get good at sharing. What are some tips, like top 3 tips that you could give folks where to start when they're like, okay, I want to get better at sharing? How do they do that? How do they become a better storyteller?
They need to honor their emotions. They need to, because like the real writing and that deep emotional that you're up till 2 o'clock in the morning, you can't put the book down, you're going on that journey with them. Are you writing from a place? Are you writing from your heart? Or you're so stuck in the cognitive space that you're losing the emotion? So that's really important. The other things I would share is, don't be afraid to show who you really are. People, look, Eric, you and I both know people are going to judge us. They're going to criticize us. We're going to have naysayers. We're going to have haters. But you know what? If you're writing for the people who believe in you, then that's wonderful. Those are the people you focus on, not the naysayers.
I like that. Those are good tips, because I think people just get so caught up. But that drives me into a next one for you: writing. Now, I like to write. You clearly like to write. You wrote a book, so that would mean you like to write. That's easy to give away that one. But a lot of people want to start writing. And I get that question, not on the show, but I get it a lot personally to me. Eric, how do I write? Where do I go to write? Like, how do I get inspired to start writing? And I'm always honest with people. I'm like, look, 4 years ago, I hated writing. Also, 5 years ago, what changed for me is I decided I want to start reading a book a week. And since 4 years ago, I've been reading a book a week. Boom, boom, boom. That's how I do it. I love it. I have a stack of books, and I just go through them. And then I grab another 5, and I stack them up, and I go through that. At the same time, I have Audible going, because if I'm mobile and don't have my book with me, I want to still be able to do it. So that's my trick for writing. What are your tricks to get inspired by writing? Have you always been a writer, or was there something you were like, I want to put this? So how did you get started? Because I think that's key for so many people think, and you, Rachel, I'm sure you've heard this, that we just wake up and we love writing. That we're like, they're like, oh, Rachel, you just wrote a book because you were passionate. It's your memoir. It's your story. Yeah, I don't think you just wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to write a book, because I just don't,
Yeah, no, it was like I was telling you in the beginning, it came from my idea from my friend. I had just retired as a photographer. I ran a photography business for 10 years. And then she felt really strongly. She felt like there was too much going on in the story, that she's like, just take the chance. And what do you have to lose? What are you talking about? You're talking about a computer? You sit down, you turn your laptop, your computer, and give yourself the chance to see if this, in a way, Eric, my story found me. I didn't find it. Does that make sense?
It does.
That's what happened.
That's awesome. So for writing, so if you don't mind sharing, when you sat down to start doing this, so the folks at home, as you know, we have a lot of folks that they listen to our guests and they're like, okay, I want to start writing. What are some tips that we could kind of bring out, like, this is what worked for you to start writing? It is as easy as turning on your computer. You're absolutely right. And turning on a Word doc, Google Doc, whatever you have, Apple Pages, whatever you want to use, you could do it. But what were some tricks to help you create? I mean, obviously you have a different story because you're writing from the heart, from what you've lived and experienced. But say somebody just wants to become a blogger. They want to start. Do you have any tips for them to, like, this is how you get the creativity juices and that wonderful writer's block that we all get? I get it from time to time. It happens probably daily when I'm trying to name each episode and what they're about. And I'm sitting there going, what is this about? And I want to make it fun and interesting because you only have this much blurb to tell people, unlike 500, 750 words. It's a little bit easier to tell your story there. It's harder when there's like 240 characters. So what are some of your tips to draw out inspiration for writing?
Okay, so creating that space, that was huge for me. So I had a wonderful space So are you creating that space where you're inspiring yourself more? So if you're sitting in a space that's not motivating you, like the space that I write in is extremely motivating to me. That's one thing. The second thing is, do you have a supportive group of people who believe in you? That's super. If you have people who don't believe in you, that's really going to mess with your self-esteem. They're going to say, who are you to become a writer? The third thing I would say that's really, really important is to have people read the book as you're writing it. I had core people who were reading chapters as I went to get feedback. That I would strongly recommend. And also I had a publisher and editor, so she took it, from there for the editing. But I would strongly recommend having people read your book as you go to get feedback. And you want people who are going to be honest with you and not just tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely, I like that advice. I think it is key to share, and I think that's it's funny that you said that, because I know my thing with writing, and I'm just going to cough up my sins. I started sharing my writing, but it was a very big fear factor, right? Because you write it and you think it's gold, and you have to also have that. I'll have the caveat: you have to have the ability to take constructive criticism.
Yes.
Which, as a writer, sometimes could be like, this is what I want, and I've sent something off to a publisher and to an editor, and they send it back, and my writing team's probably going to laugh when they hear this, because they review all of my writing, because now I've become very comfortable. But at first, it was really hard to take that criticism of your friends going, dude, where did you learn how to spell? Of course, I have Marine friends, so they're a little gruff. But you're right. I think that is one of the key steps, is sharing your work and having people understand, like, hey, this is first draft, first generation, especially when it comes to blogs. I've never written a book. I have friends just like you who have, and I know it's difficult, but they say the same thing. It's like, because I've helped be part of the book writing process, where I had like the PDF sent to me, and it would be like, oh, here's next 5 chapters are written, here, go through it. And I'm like, this is really good. Or, bro, like, you lost me here, here, and here. So I think that's sound advice, but you could even use that in blogs, right? I mean, as a blogger, you could be like, hey, here's my next piece, read it before I goes live.
And look, Eric, no one's perfect, right?
Yeah.
No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. And in all honesty, we're our worst critics. So no matter what you told me and I told you, we're going to be our worst critics. So if you have these people who are like, there's new ideas that could be brewed, right? Someone's going to read those first couple of chapters of your blog and go, this came up for me. Did you ever think about it? And we all know that the more you brainstorm together, and the more there's nothing better than being on a round group discussion, right? We're around the table and we're throwing ideas around, we're going back and forth. It's the same thing. And getting the feedback.
And that is key. Part of storytelling is getting that feedback. And I'm a big fan. We actually used to have it on our website. We changed it a long time ago because, websites are constantly a changing factor. One of the big things when I started my speaking career and going public and standing in front of audiences was storytelling, not story yelling, which I think so many people do that nowadays. And I think there's a big way to get your story across, especially we could talk about racism in our country and how it is. And I think there's a big difference between yelling and just telling a story like we're doing here. Sharing it in long form, sharing the pain of what it feels like to people don't know what they're going through. And I think a perfect example of kind of not understanding a story but being cruel has been the way Kanye West has been treated for having a clear mental disorder. And it's like, it's okay to ridicule him in a country that is known for ignoring mental disabilities, period, in our country is something. I mean, we're losing veterans 22 a day to suicide, yet we still think it's okay to go attack Kanye. And I'm not even one of Kanye's biggest fans. I love his music. I don't agree with his politics. But I don't think it's appropriate to attack somebody. It's like attacking somebody because you deem that they have some disability. Joe Biden is a perfect example of that. I've never seen social so filled with unproven hatred. And it makes it weird. It's hard to go overcome that, because trying to have a positive message and being like, we need to stop racism in our country. And it's simple stuff. Why are you attacking somebody that you deem as slow? Like, are you a doctor? If you're not a doctor, you shouldn't be saying somebody's had a stroke or anything unless you know for a fact, or you don't, I don't know. I guess it started after 9/11 and it's kind of been that way. I swear to God, it's like, I felt bad for all of my friends who were in the service that were Muslim on 9/11 because they were viciously, even in uniform were attacked. I mean, it's been something that constantly goes on. And in our country, here's 9/11 is going to come again, and I still hear the same comments, right? It's like, I'm like, you're wrong. So how do we tell our story without being the annoying guy on the side of the corner screaming it? What's the difference between and when it comes to activism, and that's what I really want to get from you is, as an activist, how can we use our storytelling to be where it drives home a point instead of being, like I see here in Portland, the guys on the street corner who are just yelling nonsense and their story doesn't drive home anything. It actually makes you want to go tell them to be quiet because they're just embarrassing themselves. So give that fine line difference between being a good social activist and telling your story so it drives home a point instead of being just that loudmouth.
I can get my point across in this tone. There could be 100 people in the room and you and I are having a conversation. You don't need to yell to get the point across. If you look inside my eyes, Eric, and you see the pain and the hurt and everything that I fought, you're going to see it. You're going to see it. You're going to understand it. I don't need to yell. I might sit down with you at a table, have a cup of coffee, and by the end you get up and go, I felt what she was trying to say to me, and she didn't even raise her voice. That's and like you, I'm a huge advocate for veterans, and that's a big deal to me. I have PTSD, so that's one of my other causes. I'm a huge advocate for mental health in this country. And for people to be empathetic, because you don't know the stories. You absolutely do not know the stories unless that person tells you the story and you didn't just read it somewhere.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You just said you have PTSD, but yet and I've heard this as a veteran, I can't even stop laughing because I always say, well, you don't look like you have it. So I don't know if you've ever heard that because that's what, many veterans I've been told that they're like, yeah, we love it when we say we have PTSD and somebody goes, well, just so you know, you don't look like you have it. You're like, thanks. I didn't know I needed to wear like a badge of courage around my neck and say that we have it. Mental disease in our country is a huge issue. I would almost put it, racism is number one. The way we treat women in our country would be number two. And number three, the way that we ignore mental health in America as something's wrong with you. It's a minor thing. As a veteran, I know I can speak for a lot of us where people think because one bad seed, we're all bad, or we're all one step. If you say you have PTSD, it's this scary moment where you're going to be judged. And I'm sure you've gone through that. When you say you have it, for some reason, people think we're just all going to go crazy with it, open our trunk of our car and we're just going to go blasting away on people. And that's not true. I mean, so many veterans I know who have it, but they have amazing careers and amazing jobs and own amazing companies that are multi-million-dollar companies, and you would never know because they don't walk around with it as a badge of courage. We fight for it and we go for it. Some of us don't have PTSD and we fight for those with it because we have a voice. And I think that's what we're driving home the point. Racism is an issue. The way women are treated in our country is for sure an issue. And mental health. It's laughed at still. 2020, we're still laughing.
I'm trying to end that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to end all those three major issues that you talked about: racism, mental health, women's issues. Because all three of those issues happen to me a lot. I'm turning it around and going, this is what you need to talk about. This is what you need to understand. It's so simple, Eric. It's being a compassionate, loving human being. It comes down to that. It comes down to that.
You make it sound easy, but we see a lot of people on social media seem to struggle with those the simple things of being human and treating people with respect, love, and kindness. Let's talk about social before you go. What's your thoughts on it? Because right now, to me, I'm going to say this and people are going to cringe. I'm actually barely on Facebook now. I spend more time. I love Twitter. I always have, but I'm a sports guy. So there's lots of sports. And I can give my 2 cents on Twitter and move on. And Twitter doesn't turn into some long, like on Facebook. I have family and friends and vets. And I love all of them. But sometimes the veterans are easy because we could disagree, but we still like each other at the end of the day. And friends, for the most part, I just don't post about politics on my personal Facebook. But family, oh my Lord, family will lose their heart, soul, and mind to be upset with something you don't agree with. And literally, like, people are dumb. I mean, I've heard people challenge people to fights online. I'm like, you know how dumb you sound when you're trying to fight your family over, something political? You sound really dumb. Like, it's not even a big movement. So what tips are you doing as we have so much activism online right now? What are you doing? What's your thoughts on social with this? How to get our message across and get through the hate and the trolls? No matter what, if you post something, you've seen it, I've seen it, you get attacked. These trolls come out of nowhere and they won't agree with you. They're like, there's no racism in our country at all. And I'm like, okay, well, there is. I don't know where you're living, but in my America, there's racism.
How do I handle it? I'm using social media only for good. I will only send out positive messages into the world. I'm very clear who I've created with my network. Kind, positive people only. And that's the truth, and my network knows that. I will only you can send positive messages into the world and still be an activist. It is very, very, very possible to do that. I won't, when it comes to trolls, and I've definitely had my share of them on social media, sometimes silence is all it takes. Because when you're not feeding them attention, guess what? They stop showing up.
Yeah, that is true. They
stop showing up. They're like, oh my gosh, she's not engaging with me anymore.
They hate it when you don't do that. They really hate it. So It's been great.
So feeding them.
It's true. So it's been great having you on the show today. But before you go, let's plug your book real fast, because I want to make sure folks that are out there have, learn about it real fast. Just share briefly, and where is it available? When is it available? And how can folks? We love having our writers on our show here to get your books out, and we always make sure people always buy books. Well, I'm a reader. I'm buying your book just because.
Thank you,
so,
and it's a good cause. Part of it's getting donated back to the orphanage. Yep. So it's going for a good cause.
So where is it available? Is it on Amazon?
Amazon. Yeah, and it's on different outlets. And my book came out in 2018. Okay. So like I said, I was doing part of the tour, and then everything happened. I was actually supposed to be up and down the East Coast that summer. So in all the Books Expo, New York's moved virtually. Everybody's adjusted to how life is.
Oh yes. So perfect. So I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll have your link if you're watching on C-Suite or on YouTube. You know that you just simply go down into the show description and you'll see in there how to connect with Rachel. We'll be putting her LinkedIn on there, so make sure you saw her on To The Point. And if you want to purchase her book, go check it out online. We'll have the link right there for you. Rachel, we want to thank you so much for joining us today on To The Point. You've been an amazing guest, giving us so much insight, and we're so proud to support you in your mission to make sure we end racism in this country and make sure women are treated fairly, and also talk about mental health, because 3 issues that we knocked out of the ballpark. It's good that you're being a voice. We need a voice for all 3, and it's good that you're that voice. So I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And everyone else, stay tuned. We got more coming up after the break. Thank you for watching today's show. As always, if you'd like to be a guest, or you know somebody that we should have on our show as a guest, feel free to email us at hello@tothepointtv.com. We look forward to hearing from you. And you can also email us if you have a complaint, want to give us kudos, high fives, or if you have an additional question for a guest. Feel free to email us again at hello@tothepointtv.com. Our Twitter is up and running, and it's for social good, not yelling and screaming political or anything else crazy on our Twitter. So follow us on Twitter at tothepointtv, and we'll tweet back at you. And as always, we want you to check out our IG. We love Instagram. Our Instagram stories are up, they're buzzing, and they're meant for you. We love our fans and followers, and we want you to know who our guests are coming on, and we want you to engage with us, and we want to engage with you. So make sure you're following us at Instagram at tothepointtv. Now, we love you on Facebook, and we want to make sure, because you're probably watching this on Facebook, like, why would you already follow us? But tell a friend that they can come follow our show and never miss a live episode. As you know, here on Facebook, make sure you head, if you're not on Facebook watching this, then It's different, but our Facebook is To The Point with Eric Mitchell. So make sure you follow us there so you always get notified when our show goes live at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Now, for the folks over on YouTube. Now, YouTube, we love our YouTube, and our channel is growing, and we love you there. Now, if you missed the live show at 12 p.m. Eastern, you can catch the premiere, which is re-recorded. The premiere on YouTube goes down every day at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and simply just go do that. So remember, with YouTube, what we want you to do is smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and flick that bell. That's right, hit the bell. Give that bell some bell love, and that way you know when we're on air and you can catch our latest episode. Check out our playlist. All of them broken down by the day and guest and show, so you can always stay up to date. Once again, on behalf of the entire team here at To The Point, we want to thank you for, again, tuning in and watching our show, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow on To The Point. As always, I am your host, Eric Mitchell. Be safe, be strong, be smart, and God bless America.
Let's get to the point with Eric Mitchell. Let's get to the point. Sit and enjoy. This is Eric Mitchell. He the host of the show. Get to the point. He is the voice. We needed this, something more. This is a daily show that's known for politics and the sports. Ain't no limit to whoever you may see at this point. Just celebrities, Eric Key's beast in the joint. As a veteran, put him at ease, then anoint. Every conversation can never be disappointed. Whether tragic or it's happy, Eric will cover whatever's happening. Whether it be your gymnast, toe tapping, talking about nearly any athlete, not taking a back seat. You're never gonna get it past T. Everybody running from it, it's a stampede. But he's on it like this man who took that knee. Mr. Mitchell's way too crafty.